Well, good afternoon. Call the regular meeting of Township Council for Monday, November 18th to order. And of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our valued relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. With that, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Councillor Kunst, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a motion to move, I have a motion to move G7 from the special close into the open.
Is that in order, Ms. Bauer? I believe it's not, right?
Well, yeah, it's currently in closed, so it would be up to the discretion of council if they felt that item could be heard in open, and then at that point it would be added to the agenda.
I believe it would be up to the mover, would it not? Where it was filed and the rationale for where it was filed.
Without getting into the content, we would defer to the mover.
Yeah, so I'm going to rule that out of order, Councillor Kunst.
Okay.
So with that, I'll call the question on A1. That carries with Councillor Martin's opposed. Item B1, get a motion to adopt the minutes of the November 4th regular meeting. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on B1? Seeing none, call the question on B1. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to adopt the public hearing meeting minutes from November 4th. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on B2? None, call the question on B2. That carries unanimously. Mr. Martin, please come forward. You have 5 minutes. Good to see you here today.
Thank you for having me.
I don't believe you need any introduction, so just go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm Wally Martin, 21628 48th Avenue. Your Worship, councillors, the Township of Langley has hired Tourism Langley as a contractor to promote tourism. I have provided with a copy of the partnering agreement, so it's in your package. It was created a year ago, November 30th, 2023. It's an extension of an earlier one. I am here as Tourism Langley only meets in secret and does not respond to messages. They do not receive delegations. But Township of Langley is a partner, and that's why I'm here to talk to you. There is no good reason for secrecy of Tourism Langley Association. The focus of my concern is a marketing campaign called This One's on Us, put on by Tourism Langley, that is promoting stays in 3 hotel brands. All other hotels, including us, are excluded. And you can actually see it here. If I can work this thing. There you can see 2 of the hotels at the bottom of the screen there, participating hotels, Holiday Inn, Sandman Hotel, and somehow I can scroll this, I think. Sandman Signature and Travelodge. 4 hotels, but 3 brands. Secrecy surrounding this is not acceptable. All details should be out in the open. What I am asking to see and know should be freely available to everyone immediately. All hotels should be benefiting from any marketing program. Instead, it appears to any person looking at the Tourism Langley website that there are only 3 hotel brands in Langley. I feel that we have been blacklisted. A disturbing item I uncovered is that Tourism Langley has 2 directors on their board representing hotels, and those presently are Sandman and Travelodge, and they are 2 of the 3 benefiting from the promotion. We try to operate a successful business and give visitors a great experience in the Township of Langley, but our biggest hurdle to overcome are the actions by the township itself. In your package, I've also included a list of payments made by the township over the past year to the contractor, totaling $672,000. These payments of taxpayer money need justification. We expect township to fix this problem. I am here because you have not responded to my emails. Finally, I want you to stop engaging in this anti-competitive behavior. Promoting 3 businesses at the exclusion of everybody else is a complete violation of the Competition Act. Everybody is entitled to free, fair, and open competition. And we don't need the township standing in the way of that. That's it.
That's it. Is there any other submissions? Okay, so there's no questions from council. I certainly appreciate your delegation. I think it's important to note that Tourism Langley is a separate independent nonprofit association funded by what's referred to as the hotel tax, not funded by the Township of Langley. The Township of Langley has a non-voting seat on their board, but has no impact on the decisions that they make. So I just want to correct some of those statements, but certainly appreciate your position that you do not support what they're doing.
And I don't agree with your assessment of the situation.
And I understand. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to item, thanks again for coming here today. Move on to item E1, 2024 Interim Housing Needs Report. To receive the report, moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there, yes. Is there any discussion? Councillor Martins.
Yeah, thank you. A question, if I can, through the chair to staff on this. It's when I was looking at the agenda, the attachment A, I noticed there's page numbers on it, and it appears to be, excuse me, page 154 through to 168. So I don't know what the first 153 pages is about. Is perhaps this housing needs report part of a larger report related to other topics? If I could just get some clarification on why we only received this one section.
Mr. Cooner?
Through your worship to Councillor Martins, you're correct. It's a part of a larger report. This specific section relates to the 2024 Interim Housing Needs Report, which is required pursuant to the legislation, an interim housing needs report by January 1st, 2025.
All right, thank you very much. And then a comment, if I can, that I thought was interesting. On page 9, or page 158, depending on how you look at it, it talks about the methodology for estimating provincially homelessness numbers. And the Township of Langley, based on our regional population and our local population, and they suggest regionally there are 11,392 people experiencing homelessness. And the proportional local people experiencing homelessness in the Township of Langley is 572. And I just wanted to highlight that. I know that we are awaiting a report back from staff with regards to our weather response for assisting people who are experiencing homelessness during extreme weather. That is a pretty large number of our population. So I'm hoping we will, as a council, continue to give that attention and consider what we can do to be part of the solutions around homelessness in our community. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to just to also have some comments here about this one. The 2024 Interim Housing Needs Report was mandated by the provincial government within Bill 44 with a dictated methodology update and change that the township and other municipalities had no choice but to embark upon, which has resulted in an increase in the 5-year target from 6,200 units to 14,000 within the next 5 years. And there was no consultation that I'm aware of substantively on determining this methodology. It's dictated from Victoria that this is the housing need within the Township of Langley, which for some reason has gone from 6,200 up to 14,000. And so I'll have a follow-up motion to address that new target. Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, basically, a really quick question, if I may, through the chair to staff. Now we've received this, now there'll be a either a follow-up or report further on in at another council meeting or in the future, if I may.
Mr. Cooner?
To your worship, to Councillor Ferguson, pursuant to the Local Government Act, we have to provide council with an interim housing needs report, and then we will update our official committee plan to accommodate essentially the 20-year housing projections and provide a further final housing needs report pursuant to the legislation as well.
Thank you.
In regards to the homelessness methodology and the latest count that we have, the homeless count in the Township of Langley and the City of Langley combined, Mr. Councillor Billy, was around 225? Yeah, 230. And the identified separation for the Township of Langley was 15. So I certainly dispute the earlier comments. I think it's important to focus on it, but I think it's also important to have the right information out there, and that information is not correct. So with that, I'm going to call the question on E1. That carries unanimously. Ms. Bauer, could you bring up that subsequent motion related to this needs report, please? So I'm going to move a slightly modified version. So the mandated methodology from the province of British Columbia required is in there twice. The staff report to council with options to pre-zone applicable infill lands on or within close proximity to 200 Street between 85 and 72nd Avenues to meet the housing target of an additional 7,800 housing units as now required due to the arbitrary mandated methodology from the province of British Columbia. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. First question.
Actually, I'm going to speak to it first, if I may, Councillor Pratt. Probably do that here on this one. I think here the challenge that we're having with the provincial government is no recognition that the Township of Langley is already one of the fastest growing municipalities in the province of British Columbia and the country. And now requiring the Township of Langley to meet a target of an additional 7,800 units within the next 5 years. When we do not meet that target, now we'll be determined to be not meeting the target, and will be put on the so-called naughty list as well, similar to other municipalities. I remind everyone again, the Township of Langley and any municipality, we do not provide or deliver housing. Municipalities approve housing. And we have thousands of units approved at third reading under application or approved that aren't being processed, they're not being advanced, they're not being built. And so I think it's appropriate for council to look at some options to meet the target, to try to not have the province create further mandates for our community. Councillor Pratt, now go ahead.
Thank you. First question would be just in relation to the words close proximity. Obviously, that's probably going to be defined by staff when the report comes back, exactly what close proximity means. So we're not looking at, neighborhoods that aren't on rapid transit.
I think it'd be appropriate to follow the 200 Street 2040 and allow some flexibility for some edge cases, but believe here this is looking at the initial distances used in both Bill 47 and 200 Street of approximately 200 to 300 meters.
Okay, thank you. And I know that in the report that we received as a part of E1, it talked about the number of units that were actually started over the last 4 years. And when you combine them all, it's about 9,800 units. So the 6,200 unit figure that you're describing, or 7,200 that you describe, is that, or sorry, 78, I just see here in the motion. That's the difference between our housing targets established in 2020 and the current housing targets now established in the updated report?
That's roughly, I think when I did the math on the weekend, I'd have to go back and look at it again, but that sounds about right.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I see it. I completely understand the apprehension around the mandated figures from the province. I just see the numbers of starts that we've actually had in the township somewhat in line with what the target that's described in this report is. So I'll be very interested to see what the staff come back with on what infill lands are actually left in Willoughby. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question on this element of E1. That carries unanimously. Item E2, official community plan update terms of reference, moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on E2? Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Instead of talking about E2, 3, and 4 individually, I thought I'd just sort of address E2 and hint to my comments further down the road, so you don't have to hear from me 3 times. But overall, really pleased with the direction that the next 3 items provide for the township, especially seeing an updated Willoughby community plan coming forward in the updated OCP potentially, if we approve these terms of reference. It's pretty cool to be a part of such a generational planning process. I've referred to 200 Street 2040 as that a few times. And so I just wanted to thank the planning team and staff that have worked so hard on both 200 Street and on the LEC project to get us this point. So really, really looking forward to seeing what that corridor can become, especially with the hopefully forthcoming transit investments and the transformation that's going to come on that corridor. So thank you to staff, and looking forward to seeing what the discussion is on the next 3.
Great, thanks. I have one amendment, direct council to page 4 of the report, page 2 of the terms of reference, under the highlighted item 2. Everybody can bring that up if they wish. I'd like to make an amendment, move an amendment that updated to reflect in item number 2 be amended to read informed by, and the anticipated population be removed. And I'll clarify that. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Ms. Bauer, I don't know if you have those, and council wants to look at those. Page 2, section 2 under goals. They said here the Willoughby community plan will be informed by 200 Street 2040, not updated to reflect. And then at the back of that paragraph, to serve the anticipated population growth and density arising from TOA development along 200 Street, that is to remove the anticipated population, because that has not been determined yet. To serve growth and density arising from transit-oriented development, not the anticipated population. That's the nature of those 2 amendments. I believe it's important that council continue to hear from the public on the future of the 200 Street corridor and not endorse the densities prescribed in 200 Street 2040, which we'll get to here in a moment, but to leave this OCP amendment a little bit more flexible in terms of the direction to staff. Is there any other discussion on that amendment? That's not the one we just moved and seconded. That's the next one. Is there any other discussion on that amendment on page 4? Councillor Martins.
Yeah, sorry, no, just waiting a moment to see if we can find the wording so that I can.
It's not being brought up. It's a very minor amendment on page 4, but I'll go over it again if you wish.
Yeah, thank you.
So page 4, do you have page 4, item 2 in front of you then? Okay, the red portion. So it says, as part of the larger OCP update, the Willoughby Community Plan will be updated to reflect 200 Street 2040. I've moved an amendment to say informed by 200 Street 2040. And then at the end of the paragraph, the last sentence, to serve the anticipated population growth and density arising from, the anticipated population is removed. So it'll say to serve growth and density, but not an anticipated population at this time. Yeah. Is there any other discussion on that amendment? Great. So I'll call the question on that amendment to E2. That carries unanimously. Now back to E2 as amended. Is there any other discussion? So I want to reiterate again that this update to the official community plan is also mandated by the province of British Columbia and will be required to provide for the target of 14,000 units in the next 5 years. That is being required by the province of British Columbia, regardless of the township's current growth rate. So is there any other discussion on item E2 as amended? Great, call the question on item E2 as amended. That carries unanimously. Item E3, 200 Street 2040. Ms. Bauer, you bring it up and I'll move it as amended. So I would like to have council, and of course it can be amended out if it's not supported, that we do the recommendation in the agenda, but that we add at the end of the first paragraph, and served by multiple mobility options, subject to reviews requested by council, the densities proposed yet to be completed, including but not necessarily limited to updated transportation plans to complete adequate road infrastructure and the designation or provision of additional schools and natural park spaces. I will move it. The recommendation amended with this addition, moved by council, seconded by Councillor Bailey. I think it's important here that again, if we're going to be endorsing a general vision of 200 Street, that it's qualified to say that before that proceeds to any further, that these other items need to be addressed. And the discussion about reducing the population projection and the densities from 400 to 800 meters has not yet been completed. But rather than do that now, we can, I think council and staff can work together on that through the Willoughby Community Plan update. I think it's very important to qualify this endorsement subject to these remaining work items. Councillor Ferguson.
Just a quick typo, is that not E3, 200 Street?
Yes, we're on E3. Did I say something different? That's a mistake. It's supposed to say E3. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
You're welcome.
That's causing the confusion. That is E3. Any other discussion on E3 as amended? Councillor Martins.
Thank you. Only to comment on the amendment, and I really appreciate this. I actually have notes right here in the margin of my agenda saying schools, question mark, traffic, question mark. So thank you for hitting both of those with your amendment.
I think it's appropriate that that these things have to be addressed along with the vision for 200 Street 2040. I think it's been great to see council engaging with the consultant and staff and the public, and get feedback from the public on how to maximize the opportunity of 200 Street with bus rapid transit and SkyTrain on the horizon for the end of the decade, and seeing what that's going to look like, and taking the time to have that consultation. So the time it comes forward for an OCP amendment next year in some form, informed by this direction from council, that there's been a 3-year engagement process on the future of 200 Street, including the Langley Event Center, which I think has been really valuable as for the next decade. So again, really appreciate the work that's been done on some of the concepts presented for 200 Street. Any other discussion on E3 as amended? No, call the question on E3 as amended. That carries unanimously. Item E4, I have a similar slight thing I'd like to move a little bit differently. Similar vein. Bauer, I believe I had a bolded version of the recommendation. So I've bolded the changes for council from the agenda. So I'll move this amended version, seconded by Councillor Rint. And this is to endorse a vision for the LEC, not the vision. Include office, residential, and ask for some consultation with ST35 or the Ministry of Education. And that considering a development proposal, informed by LEC 2040 and public input. So I think that's appropriate to slow it down a little bit on endorsing the exact concept, but endorsing a version of that potentially modified slightly based on this direction. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the amendment, and the whole planning process on the LEC project to date has been really informative because it's been done with the public, and I think it's going to result in a far better project. And so I think this is heading in an even better direction, and I know that a lot of this is in response to what we heard at those open houses. So appreciate the sentiment of the amendment.
And I think it's important that we add that the public input received through that process be highlighted to inform a proposal. This is not an endorsement of the proposal. Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you mentioning the public feedback at these different sessions, and also reading the public feedback that I have in my agenda package. One theme really loudly was the traffic, the parking. And if I'm looking at the concepts, a lot of these structures are going to be taking over the existing parking at the LEC. And I'm wondering if, through the chair and staff, if you can comment on the current number of parking stalls at the LEC for what we currently have there, and then what will be contemplated potentially in this new concept for people not taking transit to get there that are trying to use their vehicles.
Mr. Cooner, Mr. Winslow?
Your Worship, there is currently just over 2,200 parking stalls on the site. They're spread between the LEC, the park, and portion of the school district that we all operate together and share. So 2,200, and the intention with LEC 2040, one of the principles has been that all of that parking would still remain in place, just not in the same spot. So there would be a similar number of stalls, perhaps underground, for example.
Okay, so while the services are going to increase considerably, we're not increasing the parking.
Oh, sorry if I misspoke there. We would retain the current amount of parking to deal with the current uses, and then we would add additional parking to deal with any additional new uses.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's good, this particular amendment, but what I did want to say, those of us in the room that were involved with this process with the Langley Event Center, from the construction phase to the many uses we've added, and the number of people that use the facility, it's certainly a bit of a gem for the Township of Langley, and moving forward to the next step or zones or whatever you want to call it, certainly the hub and all the other things that we want to add to make the urban village. I think it's a win-win. Anytime you talk to anybody in the region or even abroad, they see the Langley Event Center as a very, very positive facility in the Township of Langley, and certainly one within the region. So my credits and attributes to those staff members involved in this council and moving forward to a first-class, already a first-class facility, but something even greater in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, no other discussion. I'd also appreciate the process that's unfolded in the public domain versus closed meetings, and really appreciate the LEC staff for advancing this faster than I could keep up with. And I certainly very much appreciate that, giving an opportunity to continue to work on it throughout the throughout next year as the Willoughby Community Plan update, just now endorsed by Council, gets underway. And I think there's been some great concepts put forward and some great ideas to continue to explore, and I look forward to doing that within the context of this motion. That call the question on E4 as amended. That carries unanimously. Item E5, grant program reforms, moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on E5? No, seeing none. Ms. Bauer, you have 3 amendments. You can bring those up. Just move them together. If anybody wishes division, we can certainly do that. Hopefully they're not controversial. I'd like to move these amendments, seconded by Councillor Rent. These are changing some of the amounts for inflation, especially the first one, which is to an increase on dry grad events, which I've heard from many parents are expensive and it's hard to fundraise, and it comes at the expense of other fundraising efforts within the school for equipment, playgrounds, and so forth. So I believe it's appropriate for us to continue to promote more strongly dry grad events. The second one is a small increase on the $2,500 after many years, and the third is an increase on the capital grant, subject to increases that we've seen in construction and equipment and other capital renewal. Is there any concern of these? Any questions? Great. Seeing none, I'll call the question on this amendment to E5. That carries unanimously. Now back to E5 as amended. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E5 as amended. That carries unanimously. Item E6, anybody wish to move that? Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on E6? Seeing none, call the question on E6. That carries unanimously. I'm going to go to Councillor Ferguson, took a special interest in this one and asked for Council to consider a revised recommendation. Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
Thank you. This is E7, Canadian Track and Field Championships. The Council give consideration committing to the 2027 and 2028 Canadian Track and Field Championships as a 2-step process as follows. That Council endorse the Langley Local Organizing Committee submission of a letter of intent to host the 2027 and 2028 Canadian Track and Field Championship at McLeod Athletic Park. And number 3, that Council requests further information from staff regarding the process of the World Athletics Certification process for McLeod Athletic Park, including the possible capital replacements and upgrades at the park to meet the required standards, in order to enable Council to respond to the local organizing committee's full proposal endorsement request prior to December 20th, 2024. I so move.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Councillor Ferguson, do you wish to speak to it anymore?
I think it basically speaks for itself. We want to make sure if we can proceed with the existing track and make very few changes or work with the particular organizing committee, that that would be a benefit to everyone. And I know that they've had challenges back east with other things, but I believe our track should be ready with very few modifications prior to moving forward with this event.
Great. Councillor Pratt?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to clarify through the mover, if based on my understanding, as opposed to submitting an application or a letter of intent and just going with it, no matter what the costs come back as, your motion would be looking at getting information at what the costs are before we actually completely commit to it? Is that the intent?
My answer back to Councillor Pratt, that is a very, very good question, because looking at the initial report, there were some things that I myself and perhaps members of council wanted to see some changes or looked at again, because there's no sense moving forward with something that if there's too many challenges or changes for anybody to make the application. So I think this particular gives us an opportunity to look at a submission that could work within the park with the existing facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I really like this, because when you look at what other world organizations like FIFA and that do, they at last minute can throw in some requirements that are extremely expensive and extremely hard to do on time. So I think this is great, so we know exactly what we're looking at, not just rely on the goodwill of people until the end and then get a surprise.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, sorry, a follow-up question through yourself to staff. Didn't we recently host the Canadian Track and Field Championships, and do they usually give 2 years in a row to a municipality?
Mr. Cooner, but Mr. Winslade?
Councillor Pratt, yes, we hosted in 2022 and 2023, and it has become a bit of a regular rotation. They do 2-year intervals.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, we have my kids were a part of the local track and field club here growing up. It's a fantastic facility that we have, and so I think, you know, track and field is one of those accessible sports that we do have here, and to promote it on a world stage I think is quite important. But we also need to understand the full expectations, considering we have hosted and we did do some upgrades already. So to understand what those needs are before we commit, I think is a good idea.
Great. I agree. I think I really appreciate Councillor Ferguson's version to keep this process alive while we get some more information on the costs rather than an estimate. Appreciate that. So with that, I'll call the question on the alternative moved motion for E7. That carries unanimously. Move on to E8, recreation fees review and non-resident surcharge. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on E8? Okay, seeing none, call the question on E8. That carries unanimously. Item E9, total loss vehicle replacement capital request. Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Any discussion on E9? Seeing none, call the question on E9. That carries unanimously. Racket sports and park projects, I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on E10? Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
I see one of the funding sources is the Growing Communities Fund. My understanding is that we use that towards the ice sheet, so I was wondering where we got this this surplus from.
Yeah, Ms. Ruff?
That was the interest that accrued to that grant during the year.
That's nice.
Yeah, so Ms. Ruff, I believe it has to go back to the original source that the interest was earned from?
Correct. So we need to use it for similar projects.
Yeah, a qualifying project and all the conditions of the original grant.
And what were the conditions of the original grant?
Mr. Cooner, do we have those on top of our head? I believe it's signage, announcements.
That is correct, Your Worship. There's a bit more criteria which we can advise council.
Before it's used for another project.
That is correct.
So that's great that we're able to diversify this fund, not only support our hockey community, but now pickleball, which is something that's we've been getting a lot of attention and requests for, so that'll be nice that we'll be able to use this fund towards that.
Yeah, so this is a pre-approval, so we could get that information prior to the budget bylaw. Councillor Martins.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad to see this, and I agree. Even just in the last week, I heard from several people about pickleball, reminding us of the need for more pickleball courts in Langley. A question I have is for the ones that we're considering putting in, is there any thought to a cover for it? Has that been priced out at all?
No, I asked the same question, Mr. Winslade, but I know you have the answer ready.
No.
The answer was no.
We've taken a look at it, but right now it's not included within this design. But we are aware of that request possibly for the future. Your Worship, there was also just a question of timing. I'm not sure regarding the pickleball courts, if the wording of the resolution is once the other 4 tennis courts are built.
Yeah, so I have an amendment coming to address
sorry.
that, and
Thanks.
then the funding source of the third recommendation.
Great, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, so back to my question
Yep,
about
go
the
ahead.
cover. Is that something that maybe could be brought forward to council in the future to add that at some point, and what the costing would be for that?
I believe, Mr. Winsley, we've talked about a cover for potential pickleball courts at McLeod. That was a previous consideration by council. I believe it was being contemplated to be in the millions. Is that correct?
It would be similar to a covered sports box, which the last would be, millions, more than one for sure.
Okay.
But it's something that we'll take a look at as we go forward there.
Thank you. Well, and I do know that community, they're pretty hardy, and I know that in their own chat groups, they actually just let each other know, bring a squeegee, we need to wipe down the court here, and they're good about it. But if we could do a little more for them at some point, I would think that would be excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm really pleased to see this. I think we're addressing, obviously, 2 communities' needs. It sounds like you'll be addressing my question in regards to item 3, because I'm confused about $700,000 for lighting coming from climate action.
Yeah, so I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to discuss that in a moment. Give me some leeway. So I think it's great to see this come forward as a pretty obvious solution when you think about it, to construct 4 new tennis courts over by the Langley Tennis Center, which have been long planned but not funded and not proceeded with, and then convert the 4 courts at Langley Event Center to 12 dedicated single-purpose pickleball courts, currently not in close proximity to where anyone lives, for approximately 3 to 5 years. So I think it's a great solution in the short run while we continue to look at expansion of other options for pickleball and indoor options as well. I had an amendment to the second part. So the second recommendation, once the 4 new tennis courts are complete at Yorkson Community Park, I'll move an amendment to delete that, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on that? So what will happen is the pickleball courts will get underway right away, with the understanding that 4 replacement tennis courts are also underway, but we would not have to wait to add pickleball capacity. In the report, staff, you'll note that staff outlined how many tennis courts there are versus pickleball, and pickleball is very underserved. So I think we're in good stead here to not decrease tennis net in the end, but also get going on expansion of pickleball as soon as possible. Is there any discussion on that amendment? None. Call the question on that amendment. That carries unanimously. I have a second amendment to change the funding source in the 3rd paragraph from Climate Action Reserve Fund to the Capital Projects Reserve, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on that change of funding source? Not. Call the question on E10, that amendment. That carries unanimously. Is there any discussion on E10 as amended? And again, I want to thank staff for advancing this and getting a solution for a significant expansion of pickleball and completing the land and the greenway network and the walking path in and around the Langley Tennis Center. That will call the question on E10 as amended. That carries unanimously. Item E11, Smith Athletic Park, moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Van Popta. Is there any discussion on E11? Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, thank you. I want to congratulate Lusa. You guys must be pretty excited. And most of you know I've been rather vocal maybe about the money that we're spending, but this is not a reflection on how I feel about who's running Lusa and what you guys are doing for the kids in our community. Mark, you and I go back, way back, before I even knew any of these people. And the amount of kids, I registered through the Pucks Power Play Foundation, and the impact that the coaches and that soccer had on those kids. So again, I congratulate you. My reluctance, I guess, was more that I wanted to see more soccer fields spread around Langley, not that I'm against having this facility. So I hope in the future that we can have those discussions, have a couple more in Brookswood, in Aldergrove, maybe Murrayville, because I've, talked to a lot of families super excited about this, but also wishing that they didn't have to drive to Willoughby or to LEC. So anyway, I'm just gonna leave it there. Thanks.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. It's a pretty exciting day. Question through yourself to the staff, or potentially somebody who sits on the school liaison committee, in regards to the school district's commitment or not commitment on one of the items to fund. So they committed to fund or to partner with on the sort of pedestrian connections, but declined to commit to the upgrade option to make the rugby field permanent. What was the rationale for the declining to participate on the rugby side of things?
Mr. Winsley?
To Councillor Pratt, Council passed a resolution that we discussed with the school district or request funding for the two things. Through the superintendent, they basically indicated that they didn't anticipate the middle school and the high school to require a rugby field at that site, so they weren't interested in contributing towards it. So I guess they don't plan on having a rugby program there is probably that message.
Okay, thank you. Because I was going to ask if RE Mountain has a rugby program.
Yes, RE Mountain is the high school, and then Yorkson and Peter York Middle Schools both as well.
Okay, thank you. And then the only other question I would have is, of the additional 78 million, what vaguely is the percentage of that cost that's attributed to the wooden indoor facility, as opposed to the other sort of accompanying investments? Sorry, Scott.
I'll look to Director Groves for the details of the number.
Yeah, I may have to give, well, Scott probably has that, but we can certainly see if he does.
Hope you wanted your steps today, Scott.
Through the chair, to answer that question, it's about the same amount that we had reported back in our last report. So percentage-wise, on the top of my head, I'm not going to make that calculation, but about $60 million for the building itself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Groves. Appreciate it.
And while you're there, Mr. Groves, I believe it's been an interesting site. It's about 20 acres. Maybe you can, while you're here, give council a little bit of background on the site clearing costs that are required. It's unserviced. And it's quite significant. So the 3 soccer fields that are outdoor have been a significant undertaking just in themselves, given the raw nature of the site.
Yeah, the site obviously is a big slope, as we had talked about previously, with an 8-meter slope across the site. So there's a lot of excavation there. And the fact that there were no servicing, we have a very large detention facility just for erosion and sediment control to keep as much of the water as we can on site, because there is no storm sewer at that point yet. But council has approved building that storm sewer and outlet so that it'll be done for when we're ready. Yeah, it's been quite a complicated site. We're moving over 70,000 cubic meters or 7,000 truck and transfer loads of material off that site down to Fern Ridge Nature Park that we're building at this moment as well. So came up with a pretty interesting solution to using a lot of a problem for the Smith Athletic Park site to create something pretty important for the community.
And I think it's also important because I think Councillor Pratt's touched on a good point as looking at it as an add-on to the project. And what would, because they would have been building the field underneath it. We still would have been building field houses for washrooms and change rooms and other facilities that are now incorporated into this facility.
Yeah, that new building obviously serves lots of different functions and can help us to be more efficient with the overall site. Also providing services to the park as well through the building because we're going to put the playground in there and have washrooms for that.
So I think, Councillor Pratt, you're on the right track. It'd be important to look at it as a net additional cost when you back out the cost of washrooms, change rooms, field house storage, and other things that would have been built separately in any event.
Or had a bunch of containers on site like we
sea
do on
cans,
some of our old parks.
Is there any other questions for Mr. Groves while he's here? So we'll go ahead. We'll just pop around a little bit. Councillor Prempopta, go ahead.
Yeah, just reading the report. I think it's the last paragraph under executive summary. I just want to highlight something for the audience and for council here. Actually, sorry, it's not the last paragraph. That we are proceeding on a guaranteed max price, which is in the construction industry is hard to obtain. And I want to congratulate our team and our staff on something like that. With pricing as it is, the volatility of construction in general, to have a guaranteed max price on a project of this size is unheard of. And I think it's something that we need to champion and to congratulate you on. And for that reason alone, I'm actually even more sure of supporting this facility.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Just turn your mic on. We can avoid the speaking order. Any other questions for Mr. Groves? Okay, thank you again for you and your team's work.
Thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, really glad to support this. Soccer is one of the sports that I view is a sport that is still accessible to people who are experiencing economic difficulties right now. It is a sport that has proven to be that around the world, and that's why it's the world's most popular game. And I'm really glad to see that Lusa is looking at that. Also, for someone who, a grandpa who spends a significant amount of time in the Ice Palace in South Surrey, I'm really glad to see that that we're going to be building a world-class building for an indoor facility that is going to be done right. It's going to have the ability to, from what I understand, I actually have a cup of coffee in there, and also not have to wear a winter parka during the summer. Thank you. It's going to be a beautiful building, and I love it. And I have to congratulate, as a last point, as someone who's been involved with Horn Pit and the evolution of it, the creative way that staff has taken a difficulty here and turned it into an improvement of the project at Horn Pit by moving the organic materials down there. And I have to say, some of the environmental people that we're talking to love this idea. So staff, well done. You not only improved 2 projects, but also saved, from what I understand, saved a very substantial amount of money by moving it there and not having to pay for somewhere to put it. So good job, you guys. I love that.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to say, I want to give credit to Lusa for your advocacy. For being very clear on what your needs are and bringing them forward and working through this process so diligently. You must be very excited. You worked hard, and this is a big vision, and here we are at the final step, and that's pretty exciting. I look at the cost of it, and I shudder a bit. It's a lot of money, but I have supported this from day one. And I continue to support it, and I am really excited for the final product and coming to visit and see that. My children both played for Lusa in their early years. We determined very quickly that soccer was not their jam, but I have been connected to your organization in a personal way in the past, and just recognizing how much you do for our community, and as has been mentioned earlier, the economical piece of playing soccer for kids in our community is huge. And I'm excited. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for Langley. I'm excited for all the kids playing soccer for years to come. So well done, and I want to thank staff. The work you have put into it, challenges you've overcome, thinking outside the box, how to make this happen. It's been extraordinary. And really, you should have the rest of the year off. And I just thank you very much. This is really, really neat. That's all I have to say.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you. Just first of all, quick question to staff. We have at least two divisions of soccer. One's the Aldergrove soccer, and then the other one's Lutha. If I may, through the chair, that whoever would, maybe Jason might know. If I may, Mr. Winslet.
Yes, we have the two organizations, Aldergrove and Langley United.
Because I just want to follow up with some of the discussion earlier on. It's the fact that, we just opened up another field in Aldergrove as well, and that we do provide opportunities for folks of all ages, mostly the young little guys, to play soccer both in Aldergrove and Murrayville and Brookswood and Walnut Grove, and the list goes on and on of the different fields we have. The school district provides fields for kids as well. So we've got a lot of people playing soccer in Langley in different locations, not just Willoughby. And I think the vision came up to what can we do for the future of we're a growing population. We have growing numbers. Our waiting lists are high. So some folks came, and I guess they knocked on our doors and say, what can we do? What can we do now for the future? And I applaud the efforts of staff, but also I applaud the efforts of the mayor and your initiatives to come forward. And it takes money, and it takes an awful lot of ingenuity to find enough money to build these type of things. And we're building for the future. That's what we're doing now, because we're going to have lots more kids and lots more opportunities for people and families to be involved in a sport that is being relatively, affordable. And, I'm going to associate a little bit with Councillor Pratt, because you probably remember the days when there was rainouts on the field where you couldn't play. And now, when that's raining, Councillor Bailey can sit out there with his parka, but the kids are at least playing on all-weather fields. And now there's going to be another opportunity to play. And this is just something that is really, really, really positive. And, we're here to talk to each other. We're not here to address the folks in the audience. But from a council point of view, moving forward with this initiative, with the amount of money we're spending, and the opportunity for the future, it's going to be something that we can write about in our history books as something that's very, very positive. And I do also want to thank staff, thank the people involved, and look forward to seeing all those kids playing soccer. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Part of the reason why I've been supportive of this project from day one isn't necessarily just the athletics piece, but everything else that has gone into the project, from the detention pond under the field that is going to support a lot of growth in that neighborhood, to the trails, to the parks, to everything else. So yeah, I did want to just take a moment to say something positive, because I realized some of my lines of questioning might have seemed a little negative. I didn't want that to be the only takeaway. And speaking of positive things, I think one of the underrated pieces that this proposal is going to include, and something that I'm excited about, and I think is a testament to what happens when a user group proactively engages with decision makers and it comes to an amicable conclusion, is the fact that there's going to be a covered grandstand on the exterior field that I think is going to be a tremendous asset to this park and to this facility. So really want to commend everybody who was involved in the process from day one.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate these comments, and it's been a long couple of years, but getting to this point, I'm very happy to see this at the council table to be approved and get underway. There's been a lot of work getting the number down and coming up with a concept for the entire athletic park itself, and concentrating 4 fields in one location, I believe, is something I've heard that is a dramatic positive to the day-to-day operation, and I've heard that loud and clear. And so I understand the perception of wanting to see more facilities built elsewhere. I share that desire as well. And some initiatives we've been trying to get to the council table as well, to do just that. Here, I think we're facing a fabulous opportunity to locate this facility next to the announced high school and middle school next door, in partnership with the school district. The Township of Langley would have been expected to provide a park for that facility regardless. And I think that in itself would have, as we've heard in previous meetings when phase 1 was approved, that would have been tens of millions regardless for land acquisition, land development, and creation of sports facilities for that high school. So I think going a little bit further has created a significant facility for future generations that I'm hopeful everybody will look back on and say that was amazing that they delivered that facility for what it ended up costing 20 years from now. And I think it takes the fortitude and the drive to do that today, knowing that anyone can say it's too expensive. I really appreciate, because everything's expensive, I really appreciate the time that Lusa spent working with the staff and vice versa to work together, similar to what we do with many facilities now within the organization, working with the fire department on the desire of the Fire Hall 5, working with the user group for this facility, working with North Langley Diamond Sports on upgrades being considered for Walnut Grove Community Park, endorsed by this council to be looked at, what we're going to be doing with Noel Booth in the future with fastball. So I think it's great to see consultation and conversations with all user groups, such as even Aldergrove Soccer, where there's also upgrades being considered within the 2025 budget for them as well. I think this speaks to this council's commitment to not only move forward on commitments that it made to not only user groups but also the public to see significant catch-ups in infrastructure such as roads, public safety, and recreation. And we're well on our path to, I think, setting up the Township of Langley in a great way for generations to come. And then a very sound financial plan that I look forward to council learning more about in the next couple of budgets. I think this is funded from growth, and using that revenue stream strategically and using it quickly allows you to build more than you otherwise would in the future if we waited. So with that, I really appreciate everyone who had a part in getting this done for the community at the end of the day, for the thousands of kids and adults that play soccer in our community. With that, I'm going to call the question on E11. And that carries unanimously. Move on to item E12, capital request for old Yale improvements. Now, Ms. Bauer, this is back on the floor. Moved and seconded.
No, it's a reconsideration, isn't it?
But
Yes.
was it within the, wasn't it not within the 30 days?
You don't need a reconsideration motion, but you do need to move and second it again. We go back to the beginning and
Go
start
back
again.
to the beginning to start again. I'm going to read that memo you sent me on that again because I still have to check once in a while. So I'm going to move it. And it's seconded by Councillor Pratt. I do have an amendment, 2 amendments to this, to explain why this was brought back. So Ms. Bauer, maybe as well bring these up. I don't see any speakers. So I'm going to move the first one. We'll do these separately. The council directs staff to include, as part of the old Yale tender, pricing for both the concrete and asphalt road from 5 Corners to 214 A Street, and to advise council of the results prior to awarding a construction contract. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on that amendment? And this will bring it back to council, so you'll see the additional specific costs for the concrete option versus asphalt before it's awarded. I think it's appropriate for the public and council to see that before it proceeds. Okay, call the question on that amendment to E12. That carries unanimously. The second one changes the funding sources from the previously creative breakdown and allocations to stretch to get this project done, moving it over to external debt to assist with the 2025 budget. I'll move that. That's seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this means that as opposed to that, so effectively $3.1 million is coming from the combined water capital works reserve and the sewer capital works reserve. The remainder would be coming from external sources.
Yeah, Ms. Ruff, can you maybe explain what would happen here from your end? The water and sewer utility allocations would remain And this will undo these pre-approved allocations and have you bring forward a borrowing bylaw for a total amount.
Correct. So we'll still have the same funding. The funding will just be spread out over a longer period of time.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question on E12 amendment. This carries unanimously. Now back to the motion as amended. Anybody else have anything? Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Just a question, being that this came back for reconsideration. The second point of the motion that we were authorizing a grant application. Did we already apply for that grant?
Through your worship to Councillor Martins, yes, correct. We have already applied for that grant.
Thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. It might not be appropriate at this table right now to discuss it, but with the Arbor Ribbon Trail potentially sort of passing through that area, is there going to be any intent to improve any crossing along Old Yale Road so that people can cross north-south that would sort of reflect its position within the Arbor Ribbon Trail? Like, is there going to be an enhanced crosswalk of any kind on Old Yale Road for that, or is it going to be simply something we have to look at moving forward if we were to extend the Arbor Ribbon Trail down there?
Through your worship, correct. We'd have to look at that in the future.
Okay.
We are putting in a multi-use path, though.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
With that, to call the question on E12 as amended. That carries unanimously. We move on to bylaws for first and second reading. Official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100256, bylaw number 60696070. Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on F1? Councillor Martins.
Thank you. This application is in very close proximity to the intersection of 216th and 96th, and I know we're looking at a realignment of that intersection potentially for the north-south. And I'm just wondering why we would want to jump ahead with this and rezoning this, upzoning it, when we're still working through that other process. If it would be appropriate perhaps to defer this till we have more information about that intersection realignment.
Mr. Cooner, I mean, we could consider, we could get a memo to staff on the status of that intersection and potentially consider that at third reading.
To your worship, to Councillor Martins, as his worship has highlighted, there's some options available here. We're seeking first and second reading. This would be subject to a public hearing, so staff can provide a memo. Council can defer this item further, or council can defeat this item. The options are for council's consideration. The proponent makes an application, staff process the application and bring it for council's consideration.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. I think if we could have a memo to get a sense of how these two line up, I think that's important, because the access to this proposed development is right off of 96 in extremely close proximity to what's going to be a pretty busy intersection. You have all the traffic coming from 216th interchange heading north, and all of the east and west traffic going to and from Port Kells. And there's already a lot of traffic volume on 96 for sure. So I am a little concerned about that and how it'll work with the placement of this intersection. So I'm in favor of moving forward if we can, like you mentioned, get a memo before third reading and ahead of the public hearing, because I think the public would want to weigh in on this as well.
Great. Any other discussion on F1? Seeing none, I'll call the question on F1. That carries unanimously. To F2, I mean, Mr. Cooner, I did so note today, we don't really know now when these public hearings will end up being scheduled. Maybe mention that to council. That came in rather late. So we don't quite know if we're going to see these. They're going to make the notification deadlines for Christmas. Is that correct, Ms. Bauer? We just don't know at this point.
That is correct, Your Worship. So there's a memo that was placed, I believe, on the distribution list that advises council of the Canada Post strike, just due to the fact that we may not be compliant with Local Government Act and the Township of Langley Development Application Procedure Bylaw. Therefore, some of these public hearings may not proceed on the scheduled date, and they may be rescheduled to the next available public hearing date when the public notice can be delivered by Canada Post. We are looking at alternative delivery methods, but in the event we can't accommodate those and we're not in compliance, then we would essentially reschedule.
And we'd have to just wait until notification can be done as required.
That is
Yeah,
correct, Your
so
Worship.
as long as proponents are aware of that, council's aware of that, it's not clear when some of these are going to come back. Move on to item F2, official community plan amendment, rezoning application number 100289, bylaw number 60626063. Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on F2? Seeing none, call the question on F2. That carries unanimously. Item F3, Fernridge Neighborhood Plan Amendment, bylaw number 6057. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
At the appropriate time, I'd like to move an amendment.
Why don't we just process that? Go ahead, Councillor Bailey.
Okay, I'd like to move that 19677 24th Avenue be updated from park and open space to employment as originally proposed in the draft Fernridge Neighborhood Plan. And
Yeah, is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. So go ahead, Councillor Bailey.
so when I originally moved this into park and open space, since then I've had some very enlightening discussions with different people in the area and have decided that that was not the best move and it should go back to employment lands.
Great. Is there any other discussion on this amendment to F3? Councillor Martins?
Yeah, I appreciate what Councillor Bailey is saying about that. I'm curious if we're then reducing park and open space in that area, or is there opportunity to move it elsewhere where it is more suitable?
Mr. Cooner?
Through your worship to Councillor Martin, staff can review other locations, but in that specific area, the park and open space is quite substantial in nature. I believe it makes up almost 40% of the overall site in the area. That's in close proximity to the township-owned land. So therefore, we can explore other options, but there's still a substantial amount of park and open space.
Thank you. Yeah, I never like to see that we're taking away park space that we've already approved as a council. In the absence of perhaps that exercise, that you can find other locations to make that up.
Great. Seeing no other questions, I'll call the question on that amendment to F3. That carries unanimously. Is any other discussion on F3? So I have two amendments, Ms. Bauer. Let me bring those up. Those are on, I think those are on the agenda. Yes. So I'll move the amendment, item number 1, under recommended amendments. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on the first recommended amendment? Great. Seeing none, call the question on that amendment. That carries unanimously. I'll move the second amendment, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on the second amendment? Seeing none, call the question on that amendment to F3. That carries unanimously. Is there any other discussion on F3 as amended? Seeing none, call the question on F3 as amended. That carries unanimously. Move on to the associated motion, essentially filed in advance. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on that recommended motion? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to appreciate and thank staff for some of the changes to the subdivision and servicing bylaw that I think will be quite pertinent and quite helpful for active transportation in our community. So I just wanted to say a thank you to that.
Great. Call the question on the associated motion under F3. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for first, second, third reading, voluntary water metering bylaw updates, bylaw 6074, 6075, 6076. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Pratt, do you have any? No? Is there any? On G1, does anybody have any questions on G1? Seeing none, call the question on G1. Carries unanimously. Item G2, fire prevention bylaw, bylaw number 606160773, moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on G2? Seeing none, call the question on G2. That carries unanimously. Item G3, strategic land loan authorization bylaw, bylaw number 6080. I'll move it, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on G3? Seeing none, call the question on G3. That carries unanimously. Move on to G4, Ice and Dry Arenas Phase 2, Loan Authorization Bylaw, bylaw number 6079. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on G4? Seeing none, call the question on G4. That carries unanimously. Item G5, Smith Athletic Park Development Phase 2, Loan Authorization Bylaw, bylaw number 6078. I'll move it, seconded by Councillor Rent. Councillor Coons, go ahead.
Are we going to be challenged with the postal strike on this one?
Yes, good question, Ms. Bauer. How does that work for the alternative approval process?
No, the alternative approval process does not rely on mail. It is an advertised in the newspaper, advertised on our website, and an email out to those who subscribe to it, so we don't have to rely on the mail. People will have to drop them off. They won't be able to mail them in, but that would be the only difference.
Okay, so that there won't be any legal challenges to that, though, because people can't. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, call the question on G5. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for consideration at third reading. Official Community Plan Amendment Application number 100230, bylaw number 6033. Moved by Councillor, you moving it? No? Okay, so I'll move it, seconded by Councillor Rent. Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
I have a deferral, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, seeing no other speakers, go ahead.
Yeah, my deferral is basic. This particular application be deferred until the conclusion process of the Fraser Highway employment lands.
Yeah, so Ms. Bauer, that's not to give proponents a shock, that is labeled incorrectly in the title. So that is H1, not related, not just, so if you could just delete that line, that'd be great. I think it's not a referral, I think it's a deferral. So.
Deferral?
It's a deferral.
That's
So is that what you're moving?
Mine is a deferral, yes,
That's what you're moving, Councillor Ferguson. Is there a seconder to that deferral? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Councillor Ferguson, do you wish to speak to it further?
No, thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other discussion on this deferral of H1? Yes. Call a question on the deferral of H1. That carries unanimously. Item H2, Official Community Plan Amendment, Rezoning Application number 100242, bylaw number 58365837. I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on H2? Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, there was some concern about the drainage there down in Smith. Do we know how the proponent is spoken with the people who are going to be impacted by that, or what we potentially are doing?
Yeah, Mr. Richardson, maybe address that. I did have a meeting with about 5 or 6 concerned residents with technical staff and Mr. Richardson, and walked them through all of their concerns. Mr. Richardson, maybe follow up on that?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Councillor Kunz. Yes, myself, Mr. Rule, Mr. Anderson, the 3 leads in terms of engineering and development. Engineering, were able to meet with those residents there, adjacent and downhill. We were able to speak with them about the requirements of the subdivision development servicing bylaws, stormwater management items, downstream improvements, traffic items, as well as detailed as some of the proposed road improvements. As outcomes of that, the delegates and individuals at that meeting appeared satisfied with respect to the proposed improvements, Your Worship.
So just to address the concern, I think we spent about an hour and 15 minutes with that resident group, and also learned a little bit about the specifics of how the water management is actually potentially improved in that area, and some other potential other upgrades the township can look at for the Smith Crescent.
Okay.
So I think it was a positive, constructive meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I used to live down there, so I know that, I'm glad to hear that was addressed. So thank you.
Yeah, so 3 new detention ponds for the area, and the water is being transported down Crush Crescent to the stream there. It's not intended to flow down near their properties. Yep. Councillor Pratt?
Thank you, Your Worship. In regards to the pretty sizable community amenity contribution as part of this project, I'm curious, is this one of the projects that the proponent will be able to defer the payment of the CACs until BP is pulled, or is it at DP?
No, my understanding is that that's the community amenity contribution is due prior to final adoption. Mr. Richardson, I think that's the case?
Correct, Your Worship. It's item 13 on the development prerequisite list.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, any other discussion on third reading of H2? Seeing none, call the question on H2. That carries unanimously. Move on to bylaws for final adoption. I1, designation of Willowbrook Transit-Oriented Area, bylaw number 6021. Anybody wish to move that? Moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, the appropriate time, I'd like to move a deferral for this, please.
Yeah, I believe we did appreciate that, Councillor Bailey. So there's no other speakers, so Ms. Bauer, we can go ahead and, Councillor Bailey, you wish to move that deferral?
Yes.
Is there a seconder to that? I'm going to second that deferral. So go ahead, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, it speaks to itself there, and I think really we've got to put this off for a little while and have a little closer look at this.
Great. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Pratt?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to thank Councillor Bailey because while we might not necessarily agree on the reason for why we want this to be delayed, I think it is appropriate that we consider developing significantly high density in an area where we are actually going to have the transit in the near future. And so I think that this is appropriate to come back as part of the Willowbrook community planning process. Thank you.
So it's labeled deferral, but Ms. Bauer also has some direction for staff in the second one. I see that. That I think we substantially accept the premise of Bill 47, but disagree with the 100% rigid implementation of providing designations to every single lot within a proximity, which compromises the urban planning process. So I believe, that's if this was proceed, this will be the position of this council that there's a desire to build transit-oriented development around rapid transit. I don't sense that the township has been shy to grow. And I believe the Bill 47 is based on the premise that municipalities are not building enough around transit, which I see no evidence to conclude the Township of Langley would be one of those. Councillor Martins?
Thank you. I support this deferral motion. But just for some clarification, does that mean that we're continuing to not be in compliance with what's required by the province of BC if we're deferring this?
Mr. Cooner?
To Your Worship, to Councillor Martins, we'd have to check on the transit-oriented area if the requirement is there and a specific deadline has been posed. I believe most of the deadlines and correspondence have been in relation to the provincial housing legislation, small-scale multi-unit housing bylaw.
Okay, so, and just so I'm clear, this isn't deferring everything I'm looking at on this page because it's identified as provincial housing legislation, small-scale multi-unit housing bylaw. So is it just a piece of this that we're looking at holding off on?
This is specific to I1, Councillor Martins.
Oh, that's I2.
That's why it references bylaw 6021.
Thank you. I feel much better about that. And
This is only for Bill 47. This is not for Bill 44.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
So appreciate that clarification. This deferral, I believe Councillor Bailey is intending this to only be for Bill 47. So with that, I'll call the question of the deferral of I1. That carries unanimously. Move on to I2, provincial housing legislation, small-scale multi-unit housing, bylaw number 6020. So there's a bunch of motions in here, so we're gonna go very slowly if necessary. I'm gonna move only the first part, that council give final reading to bylaw number 6020. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on just granting final reading to bylaw number 6020? So with that, Ms. Bauer, I have an amendment I'd like to make. So I'm going to move an amendment that bylaw 6020 be amended to add the definition to SMU housing development that vehicular access to a lot must not be on an arterial road as identified in the master transportation plan or official community plan. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Great. Call the question on that amendment. Oh, there's a speaker. Hold on. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, it's just a question on, can we make amendments to BC legislation like that? Can we do that?
I believe there is some leeway, Mr. Cooner, to provide some additional regulation, but I think it would be something to be discussed.
Yes, we'd have to further explore this specific amendment and see the implications of it.
I consider it a public safety item.
I fully support this, and I'm just wondering what the backlash will be.
So I consider it to be a public safety amendment in regards to some of the situation. That one example would be 40th and 200th Street, where
100%.
we're trying to get driveways off of multi-use pathways for people walking to school. And you know, to me, in my opinion, this is probably one of the smallest asks that we had that was ignored.
Okay.
Yep. So with that, I will call the question on that amendment to I2. That carries unanimously. Now back to final reading of bylaw 6020 as amended. Is there any other discussion? We're just doing final reading at the moment for 6020 as amended now. So I have some comments, but I think I've made many on many media appearances, doing everything I could to try to attract attention, meet with the province multiple times, making very little progress as it turned out. Can we remove the amendment from the screen, Ms. Barr? Making very little progress, I think, to see the Township of Langley in a different light, along with the City of Surrey. Remind everybody that Metro Vancouver applied for an exemption for the City of Surrey and the Township of Langley based upon undeveloped urban land, and that the same situation does not exist as it exists elsewhere, that with the growth rates that we have in our undeveloped urban areas such as Willoughby and Brookswood Fernridge more than enable the Township of Langley to deliver housing for the Minister. Again, that had no impact and of no interest to the Minister or the Premier. And so we're faced with a situation that I have not yet experienced as a member of council for going on over 6 years now, having to vote in favor of something I don't agree with and don't think is good for the Township of Langley, because the version that our staff have advanced for us to review and approve is better than the default version that will be imposed by the province. And so here I am about to cast a vote in favor of something I don't agree with, due to the alternative being much worse, due to the provincial government's stance on housing has been to blame cities, not work with cities. And I'm hopeful for a new approach, but I believe that there is no alternative now but to adopt Bill 44 and proceed to address it essentially as an unfunded mandate, which will now have to start the process of looking how the infrastructure will be retrofitted for some of these areas and the cost that that's going to impose upon water utility users, additional housing throughout the township and version of an ACC system, amenity cost charges, and the cost for infrastructure may go up, which I believe is counter to what they're trying to achieve. There's a number of implications that are going to follow from this, which I believe to be a big distraction for the Township of Langley, unnecessary for the Township of Langley, and costly for Township of Langley taxpayers. Councillor Van Popte?
I hesitated on speaking to this, but I am going to. Part of my reason for running for provincial government was specifically this bill, and to fight for my community and what is right for my community. And although I'm in a position of not being in government, but a private member, I will still continue to fight for my community when it comes to housing and how we work with the provincial government, and liaising and working with the existing housing minister on making sure that we can work together and we can move forward in the best interests of Langley and how we densify.
I agree. So with that, is there any other discussion on I2 final reading, 6020? as amended. I'll call the question. That carries with Councillor Van Popta opposed.
Personal
Yep.
privilege,
What's your personal privilege?
washroom break?
Sure. Can we finish the motions under I2? I'm hopeful we can just get through these. Now that the zoning bylaw has been updated to permit SMUs, the other motions seem relatively uncontroversial. So I'll move on to motion number 2, that directs staff to update the Langley building bylaw. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on motion number 2? Seeing none, call the question on motion number 2. That carries unanimously. Motion number 5, direct staff to update the DCC bylaw to account for small-scale multi-unit housing development. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is that correct? Is there any discussion on motion number 5? Seeing none, call the question on motion number 5 of I2. That carries unanimously. Motion number 9, the staff monitor the situation and report back. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on motion number 9? So that will call the question on motion number 9 of I2. That carries unanimously. So that will take a 5-minute recess, return here at 3:15. Thank you. Okay, so we get back underway. Item I3, library loan authorization bylaw number 6039. Moved by Councillor Rint. I'll second it. Is there any discussion on I3? Seeing none, call the question on I3. That carries unanimously. Item I4, highway closer dedication, removal, and disposal bylaw number 6068. Moved by Councillor Rint. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on I4? Councillor Pratt? No? I4? Any discussion on I4? Call the question on I4. Carries unanimously. Rezoning application number 100493, bylaw number 5647. Moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Pratt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a question through yourself to staff. This application's seemingly taken a quite extended period of time to get to this point. I'm wondering if staff have any ability to comment on as to why. What was the holdup?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Pratt. Yes, I think it originally came to council back in, received third reading in 2020. Staff's understanding is just the market conditions and the proponent's ability to provide for the outstanding development requisites at that time, but mostly due to market conditions, your worship.
Okay, thank you very much.
Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question on I5 bylaw. That carries unanimously. Somebody wish to move to approval of development permit application number 100911. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Is there any discussion on the development permit? Seeing none, call the question on I5 development permit. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for final adoption, rezoning application number, oh yeah, we're still on, yes, we're still on that. I6, rezoning application number 100570, bylaw number 5789. Moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on final adoption of I6? Seeing none, call the question on I6. That carries unanimously. Mayor and council report. Does anybody wish to make a council report? Does anybody wish to make a regional report? Great. Does anybody have any questions on for information items 1 to 4? Okay, move on to other business. 01, I'll move that.
For the level we have to take over again.
Yeah.
Like, that seems getting a little bit tricky. And is there actually software out there to somehow capture that?
Yeah, I think if you consider, like this last season, we estimated about 850 people from the township, residents, did not get into a swim lesson.
Yeah.
So if you think, 850 people, we registered about 5,600 people into swim lessons this last session. And, how can we take those 850 people that did not get anything, let alone someone just trying to plan for level 1 and 2, maybe in the same season?
Yeah.
So we're trying to really address those that don't have anything, really.
Yeah.
And so give them opportunity to get into something down the road and actually, plan beyond our season to season. And so that's what we'd be developing in this report.
Okay, thank you. And I support that. Yeah, it's not fair if the same people that are maybe able to be right at the computer right at the right moment and others can't,
Right.
and then they miss
Yeah.
out on the opportunity. So, in the spirit of fairness, I appreciate that you're looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think, and I appreciate, Mr. Stair, the time you spent with me sort of going over some of the options here that informed a lot of this motion. I think Councillor Martins has hit one of the key issues, that multiple people are registering for the same course over and over again in the same season, and that has to be addressed. And then you have others that have indeed stated online and elsewhere that they're not available for the exact moment that the registration opens. So I think the goal here, the intent, you and I are clear, but the wording of the motion is very carefully done as well, that it leaves some options for you to look at it and see what improvements you can make to address these core concerns that members of council, including myself, have heard from the public around trying to get into these courses. And you do have some restrictions to work with in terms of the software and current practices. And I don't know if you want to add anything else, but the motion is worded to give you some options to come back to us and just do what you can and see what that looks like.
Yeah, I think for sure. We're the 4 items listed there give us lots of options to bring back and look at.
And I think, probably the biggest one is that the long-term wait list kind of option. But just because something hasn't necessarily been done yet doesn't mean we can't look into how that could be. And so I think we're going to investigate that as well.
And so if someone is not available on the exact day at the exact time because they shift work, and they can register maybe a couple of seasons in advance and then have that option if they wish to just to have that, so that they're, and then also I think what you've also identified with me, and we discussed it, is the wait list resets every season. Maybe outline that rather than having a wait list. If you're waitlisted once, you have to come back and you end up on the wait list again, as opposed to eventually earning your way into a spot. Maybe outline that.
Yeah, so that part, the wait list, season to season, it resets. So if I was on a wait list and did not get into anything, that's one part that we're looking at, how we can pull some wait lists forward for those that did not get into any wait list or into any class. And so that's kind of one lower hanging fruit that we're looking at, if we could possibly implement. And so, if we could implement that we should be able to get a lot of people that didn't get anything last session into something the next session, or season, sorry. Yeah, so.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? No, call the question on 02. That carries unanimously. Move on to 03. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on 03? Councillor Kunst?
Where is the Aldergrove Amenity Fund at, and does it get regular funding?
Ms. Ruff?
Aldergrove Amenity Fund gets its funding from the CACs. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my spreadsheet. We're at about $2 million.
So that's been about, what, 3 years, right? Since we've had maybe about 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, well, both sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Call the question on 03. That carries unanimously. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to move the Ponder Park be it resolved that Council hereby rescinds Council Policy 06301 Ponder Park Agreement. Further, the Council hereby pre-approves the Ponder Park Shelter Demolition Capital Project within the 2025 capital budget and the 2025-2029 financial plan with $75,000 funded from the Capital Projects Reserve.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Go ahead.
Yes. First off, I have found Ponder Park, which most people have difficulty doing. And then when the first time I went there, I've been there a few times, I was astonished at the condition of the shelter. And since then, it's continued to disintegrate to a point that I believe is dangerous. And to leave that thing up there, I think we're at great risk of someone getting injured there. So I'd rather see that thing torn down, and in the future, we'll look at developing Ponder Park to a point where it should be.
Councillor Martins?
Yeah, I did reach out to staff earlier on this question. When it's got, it seems to be a title, Ponder Park Shelter Demolition Capital Project. But there doesn't seem to be any document or staff report. If I am correct, if I could just double check with staff, if you were able to find something. I think there was only something about a roof.
No, I think what happened here is Councillor Bailey's been quite proactive with me talking about what we're going to do with Ponder Park, what the future is there for 2025. So I did follow up with facility staff, and that is the quoted cost, and that will be advanced now that Councillor Bailey has inquired. That will be advanced in the 2025 capital budget as funded, but it was due to the proactive efforts of Councillor Bailey.
Okay, no, that's helpful. And I feel like we have talked about this in the past. At some point, I know that all of council was invited there to do a walkthrough, and I appreciate the condition of this shelter is heading downhill in a hurry. There is some kind of memorabilia inside that structure, I think related to the Scouts. And I'm wondering if it's possible that that can be somehow retained for that organization, like some old signs and things from like decades ago, in case they might want to keep that before it's fully demolished.
Your Worship, Councillor Martin, we will definitely be in consultation with the Scouts and Guides to ensure that any of their belongings or memorabilia will be safely returned to them.
Thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was curious with relation to the first item where it gets rid of the council policy on the Ponder Park agreement. With the agreement coming to expire next year, when was the last time that committee met? Do we know?
Your Worship, to Councillor Pratt, my understanding is the only proof I've looked at is the Ponder Park Committee met in 1987, I believe. And then I think the Scouts are supposed to provide, Scouts and Guides are supposed to operate out of Ponder Park and use it for overnight bookings. And then essentially that did not continue on a continuous basis. And then in 2019, what had happened was there was a Langley Outdoor Education Program that started operating, I believe, out of Ponder Park 3 days a week. And then in May 2022, all bookings were suspended due to the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. And the shelter was boarded up on summer 2024.
Thank you.
Great, seeing no other discussion, call the question on 04. And that carries unanimously. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I'd just like to move this ahead. I'm quite sure there's going to be some discussion on this.
Right,
So
you
I'll move
mentioned you wanted to change one of the dates. Why don't we move
Yes,
it as amended?
I'd like to amend one date, and that is in Part 2, and amend from November the 1st to October the 1st.
So you're moving that as amended?
Yes.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. Go ahead, Councillor Rent.
The reason for that amendment is the members of the fire department reached out to me and pointed out the fact that with the 8-week training period, November the 1st would run through the Christmas period. So in consideration of not only the people being trained, but the trainers and their families and that kind of stuff, I really kind of respect the fact that the fire department's looking after the well-being of their members and their members' families by getting this over with before Christmas rather than after.
Great. Any other discussion on 05? Councillor Martins?
Yeah, I would like to move division of these 3 points.
Sure. Is there a seconder to division? Seconded by Councillor Kunst. Great. So we'll call the question. Any discussion?
Can I
Yeah.
speak
On division? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. The reason for this is all within this motion, we're talking about RCMP, hiring or not hiring of officers. And then the next one is talking about firefighters, and the last one's talking about bylaw enforcement officers. In point number 2 and 3, we are looking at hiring more, so more firefighters, more bylaw officers, but point 1 is pulling back on hiring of the RCMP officers. And I would like that one in particular is where I'm looking at the division, if number 1 can be pulled out, and we could talk about that separately, because the way this motion is worded, it's an either or. So I either have to support entirely these 3 points or not. And I'm going to say right now, and I appreciate they're in the room, I have supported every single thing for firefighters and all of the infrastructure needed in the Township of Langley since the beginning of this term. And it's putting us as council in a difficult spot by lumping this in with pulling back on hiring more RCMP officers. It's kind of pitting the 2 agencies against each other, quite frankly. So I would prefer if we could separate them out and we could vote on them on their own. That's the reason for my motion for division.
Councillor Kunst on division?
So if division succeeds, I do have a deferral motion, which would be to defer the first paragraph to when the RCMP has an OIC, that we could understand the impact of maybe not
Okay.
hiring.
Well, we'll see what happens with division. Could
Yeah.
process the deferral regardless, but we'll see
Okay.
what happens with division. So with that, call the question on division 05. Division is defeated. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Van Popte, Councillor Pratt, Councillor Ferguson opposed. Now back to the main motion. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Coons, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious why we would be holding back RCMP officers. I'm fully supportive of adding, number 2 and number 3, but I'm uncomfortable not having the superintendent here to speak on behalf of the RCMP as to how that might impact the levels of service that our community is expecting when it comes. We talked a lot about crime and now we're going to defer this 2 additional members, and I just think that we should not do that. So, I mean, I'd like to hear the reason why for that.
Okay, well, we can certainly see if there's any other speakers. Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. Since these are all being lumped together, the first question I have is with regards to point number 2. It says 8 additional suppression firefighters be added. Is this in addition to what we have already voted as a council?
No, this would be an adjustment to the addition to the base budget in the respective years.
So the number of firefighters is not increasing with this. This is sticking with what we've already been doing?
This is directing the numbers that are outlined there for 2026, 2027, 2028 with a new formula as opposed to what was in the 2024 financial plan. This is an adjustment to bring forward a slightly different version for the 2025 financial plan.
Sure, okay, and then with regards to 2 added in 2026 for the bylaw officers, is the same logic applies? It's the numbers we were already looking at, or are we adding 2 more to what we've already authorized?
No, this would be the same logic, so this would be 2 more in 2025 with a different start date added as to the base budget of 2024.
Yeah, okay, no, thank you, I appreciate that clarification. So I'm going to go back to point number 1. I was pretty disappointed, I'm not going to lie, to see this. I've, for the last year, on a provincial level, we have been hearing, one of the main concerns of citizens in the province is public safety, law and disorder, crime, people not feeling safe in their neighborhoods. That's been a common theme, and in fact, different political parties actually creating that as part of their platform to hire more police officers, not less. So I think people have been very clear in how they feel about this issue. And I was looking and doing a little bit of research, relying on the report that we received from E-Division, the publicly available report on deintegration. And we looked at comparators in here. There's a table. So based on 2022 population numbers, they talk about a pop to cop ratio, which is a population number to police officer representing them. In Delta, there's 587 members of the public for every police officer, and the cost per capita being $393. Abbotsford, 777 members of our public are represented for every police officer in Abbotsford. In the township of Langley, it's 840 members of the public for every police officer. So we actually have the worst already with the representation for each person in our community, and the lowest cost of $261. So that's an observation. I look at just this past week, there was a joint force operation between Bylaws, Langley Bylaws, and other bylaw departments, and the commercial vehicle inspection unit, that's a provincial arm of commercial vehicle inspections, and many law enforcement members present. And they had a very successful joint forces operation. It was great to see in Gloucester pulling over a lot of commercial trucks, a lot of infractions observed. And from that couldn't have happened without the police support. Our bylaw officers are limited in their authority when it comes to traffic enforcement. As an example, from the statistics from that JFO, there were 38 violation tickets issued under the Motor Vehicle Act and regulations. Those have to be issued by law enforcement, not by bylaw. there were 12 bylaw tickets issued. So I want to first of all highlight what an excellent operation that was and great cooperation between several police agencies. But it shows the amount of work that the police are doing that can't happen without them there, to be honest. They are the only ones in our community. So we're looking at 3 different public safety here. We're looking at police, we're looking at fire, we're looking at bylaw officers. I fully support all of these 3 agencies, but I also recognize they have very different purposes. And I'm opposed to one being pitted against the other. When we talk about the RCMP, yes, I agree, it's unfortunate we do not have the OIC here to speak on their behalf. I did a bit of digging myself. So some of the current challenges Langley RCMP detachment is facing due to resourcing, which will only become exacerbated without any new hires for 2 to 3 years. Langley RCMP frontline officers are being inundated with more calls for service due to the population increase of the township and also new businesses and commercial activities. This is leading to more stress and burnout of our officers as the case burden is also increasing. On any given frontline shift, that means your regular patrol shift that you see out there driving around the streets, they are having to call in 2 to 3 members on overtime in order to run that shift. This is increasing operating costs and a direct hit to policing budget that could be used for other policing activities such as drug projects, cold case homicide projects, or traffic-initiated projects. For example, there were 2 pedestrian fatalities involving commercial vehicles in the past month alone. These investigations take several months to investigate with countless police hours to create a package suitable for Crown Council charge approval. The demands and burden on the police from the judicial system is ever increasing and is only going to become more cumbersome once body-worn cameras are live in the next few months. The amount of disclosure and report writing that will follow is no doubt going to burden our officers to meet the demands of the courts. There is also an increase in extortions of South Asian business owners. Extortions are considered a major crime, and there is a high risk to public safety. Extortion investigations require a dedicated team of seasoned investigators to one particular investigation for the first initial weeks to ensure that perishable evidence is collected in a timely manner. This calendar year alone, Langley RCMP has seen 6 cases of these extortions, and it seems to be becoming more frequent than not. There were no reported similar cases last year. With the formation of the Township Commercial Vehicle Inspection Section under the Department of Bylaws, Langley RCMP will also see an increase in the amount of time the traffic unit will be assisting. Currently, they are assisting Bylaws with their day-to-day activities such as homeless encampments and vagrancy. This ties up an officer for numerous hours at a time, often several days a week for one encampment. There is no anticipated decrease in this type of assistance to our partners for the safety of bylaw officers. RCMP is seeing more police officers willing to transfer to Langley from other jurisdictions, such as Surrey. As Surrey Police Service increases their establishment, the RCMP will decrease their position numbers, leading to more available members. Langley Detachment will not have to solely rely upon depot to increase the establishment. Deferring an increase to establishment will take years to catch up to the population and increased demands of township communities. We have the ability to capitalize on Surrey RCMP members leaving Surrey. However, Langley RCMP would require the increase in establishment as discussed and approved in principle in 2023 and 2024. I say all that because I think it's really important. When I look at the feedback from the budget talks last year, the #1 concern for the people in the Township of Langley was policing, it was crime, it was safety. And it really upsets me that that's the one that we're looking at deferring. We are playing roulette with people's safety in the interest of I'm not sure what is going on here. So I want my the fire colleagues to hear that are here today. I support you 100%. And it really troubles me that I'm being put in a position that I have to pick one or the other over the other. So please know that it's not a reflection on you. but I have to support, I cannot support this. It's completely tone deaf to the RCMP. They have not been included in this conversation, and they're holding on by a thread. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
So if you look at this, this is in the context of the financial plan. And when it's spoken about comparing to Abbotsford and Delta, they are both regional jurisdictions. The RCMP is not. That is a fundamental difference here, because what happens is we get these edicts coming from Ottawa that have been extremely expensive, and we have no control over the last, with these 3 budget periods. Just the cost, increase the cost from the RCMP is 6.81%. Of the total tax increase over these 3 years, just the RCMP alone are costing 6.81%. So when you look at the difference between regional jurisdictions and Ottawa jurisdictions, we have no control whatsoever about what's coming out of Ottawa and what it's going to cost. Not for 1 second do I disagree with the fact that RCMP are needed and police officers, and I support them, and so is this council. Over the last 2 years, we have added 7 police officers, 5 in 23 and 2 in 24, and going back a little further, over the last 5 years, 21 police officers have been added to this detachment. And if you look at the end of the last couple sentences of Part 1, it is subject to the deintegration of the Langley RCMP, and that is key. If when this deintegration goes ahead, we will have more of our officers that we pay for here in the township, and Langley City will have to finally bear the burden, as in the same time period they have not increased any RCMP. When I hear we're pitting fire against police, I fundamentally disagree. Well, the police are taking a hit, so are the fire. The fire are being delayed. This is, you think it's hard to not support the police, go in my position, and deferring some of the increases in firefighters. I feel comfortable with this because of the main reason I came to council was public safety, and fundamental to that was fire. Right now, by the end of this year, we will have increased the staffing of firefighters by 25%. That's on the floor firefighters. And I've got a list here of what we've done for the fire department, and it is extensive. And these were not promised. So in light of the budget, and because we've moved ahead with the fire department further and faster than I thought was possible, I'm just going to list some of these things that make me comfortable with pushing back the hiring of some of these firefighters. First, we hired a new chief, then we hired a new deputy chief. And by doing that, we settled an awful lot of HR problems. We went from 8 grievances to none in one meeting, from what I understand. Then we settled a 2-year contract for the firefighters, and in that contract, for the first time ever, IAFF 4550 took a provincial lead with the mental health benefits for firefighters, which were sorely needed, and we took that lead for the province. We purchased, not planned, now S4, and it is the second busiest apparatus, I believe, in the township. We hired 11, and they are on 11 new firefighters. We ordered and paid for vehicles for the next 5 years. So let me outline what that $10.8 million did. 1 heavy rescue, 4 engines, 1 aerial quint, and because we did pay for them and order them, because of lag, we also are getting 2 more Squad 4s, which will greatly reduce the wear and tear on our larger vehicles. We renovated Hall 4 inside and out to accommodate the larger rigs at a cost of $800,000. We then negotiated a contract from 21 to 26, and we took the lead in Metro. For the first time ever, a local this size said that our firefighters should know exactly how much they're going to be paid. contrary to what we do with the RCMP officers, we have no idea what we're going to be paying for them in the future on wages. And that is the difference between us being able to deal with regional things like our fire department much better than we can deal with Ottawa. We've got Hall 5 now under construction, a state-of-the-art building that has been, from the very first minute, had the firefighters who are going to serve in that hall have been involved, and it is going to, for the first time ever, increase the protection for the south end, Brookswood, and the total south end of Langley. We're looking at a new location for Hall 8. Hall 3 is now looking at renovations there in excess of $2 million. We still have no grievances 2 years into it because we have a new administration. They've found a very congenial way of settling problems that come up. We've got 11 new firefighters that are going to be starting at the end of the year, which again will increase our coverage by 25%, which is so far under. We're short of RCMP officers, yes. But when it comes to firefighters, we are desperately short. When we started this, we had 18 firefighters to cover the whole the township, and that puts people and the firefighters at risk. We are getting creative with the old Hall 5. We're turning that into a training facility. Will not only increase the ability to train our firefighters, but it'll also turn into a revenue generator. We were the first department in British Columbia to put PFAS-free gear on some of our firefighters. We've reestablished some other very important relationships when it comes to that. We also now have, for the first time ever, high-rise training and orientation dealing with that, instead of in the future having to rely on Surrey to come and deal with the high-rises that we have built and are building. We're doing that ourselves. We're training our guys in confined space training. We've created teams for CISM, which is critical incident stress management. And we've now got FR, EMR trainers, we've got technical rescue, we've got fireground operations. And while this may sound like I'm speaking another language, when it comes to the firegrounds, this is critical stuff. We've got CIS management training going on, which I was a part of in my career, and I know how important that is to maintaining the mental health of our firefighters. And we've now got 6 career members training up to an NFPA standard for tower rescue technicians. And they've expanded on liquid natural gas orientation, hazmat training, and live fire. These are all things that we've done. So I am very comfortable with saying to the firefighters, we have to delay some of your members coming on the floor. And that hurts my soul, because when I first looked at taking this job, I wanted 22 a year. I didn't want 11. Because that's what's really needed. So when it comes to fire versus police, that's not what this is about. This is everyone taking a bit of a step back to face the financial realities of what we're facing right now. And the bylaw enforcement officers, we're so far behind on them that we have to hire those too. So I'm not pitting anyone against anyone or any department against any department. I'm saying we're moving ahead. We're still moving ahead. We've taken security. We've upgraded the security measures in the RCMP detachment. And, well, we can't talk about the security that's being done in there. It was desperately needed. We're still moving ahead on the new gym for the RCMP officers, as that goes to their mental and physical health. And then we're looking at security outside also. And again, I'm not going to get detailed on that kind of stuff. Everyone's got a share in this, okay? And when the de-integration is complete, Then we'll have another look at hiring police officers, because we'll have an accurate picture of how many we've been sending into the city, and the township residents have not been getting the benefit of the officers. We hire more officers, more of them are gonna go to the city, and they'll continue to not get any more officers. So this is, I stress, subject to deintegration of the Langley RCMP. Once we get that over, I will gladly have a look at hiring more, seeing what the need of the ratio to firefighters to population, and I will gladly at that time support more police officers.
Councillor Van Popta?
Thank you, Councillor Bailey, for speaking to the facts of the matter and not the feelings of the matter. Everybody in these departments is just being realigned, if that's the way that I'm interpreting. Through your worship to staff, for Mr. Cooner, can you please interpret that we're actually not cutting, we're just realigning when the hires are brought on?
Sorry, are we discussing in regards to RCMP or?
Well, all
fire?
three departments. Are we this is just a realignment of when the hires are brought on that we've already budgeted for, correct?
It looks like we are deferring the RCMP officers.
By 1 year?
That would be my interpretation, but that would be up to council to clarify. And we, looking at the budget, we had originally had 11 firefighters in 2026. It looks like we're reducing that.
Okay, so we're deferring multiple departments here, not just pitting against each other, which is, I think, important to clarify. I concur with Councillor Bailey in regards to deintegration. We are in midst of that process. We've seen multiple reports that corroborate, and statistics that our members are going into the city of Langley, and we've are pretty vocal about our frustration at that. And until that is resolved, and in these tight times and trying to be prudent with our financial plan, it makes sense until deintegration is a little bit further along. I believe we have a new safety minister as of today. Hopefully those conversations will result in a quicker outcome for the deintegration. Yeah, I appreciate Councillor Bailey's effort on this to try and just modify our numbers and just do what's needed going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question through yourself to staff or to whoever can potentially give an answer to the question on deintegration. What's the latest, and when can we expect an update now that Cabinet's been sworn in?
Mr. Cooner?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Pratt, the deintegration is an ongoing process, and we can advise any further details with respect to deintegration in the closed meeting.
Thank you.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, so I was just wondering if anyone has, if the mover has spoken with the RCMP or with anyone in charge at the RCMP, and would it be prudent to maybe just defer 5.1 or 1 until such time that we could hear back from the RCMP about the impact of this? I mean, I applaud all the efforts that Councillor Bailey has advocated for our fire department, because it was needed, and I believe every person at this table has supported those changes. And
Not everyone.
At this table?
Not everyone. You're forgetting someone. But it doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Not here?
She's not here. It's not everyone.
So, okay.
Not everyone.
At this table, currently sitting here right now.
Great.
So I guess what I would just ask the mover if we could postpone number 1 until such time that we have heard from the OIC.
Well, I think you have to make a motion. The motion no longer belongs to Councillor Bailey. It belongs to council. So it's it's on the floor. It's not up to Councillor Bailey. It's up to council what happens with the motion.
Okay. Just that way, maybe we can get the facts from the RCMP, what those potential officers, not having them might.
Are you moving a deferral of some kind?
So maybe I'd like to move a deferral.
Go ahead.
I'd like to move a deferral of 5.1, just until such time that we have the RCMP here to
I'm
just
just
speak
going
to
to
it.
confirm with Ms. Bauer that we can defer a portion of a motion. I don't believe that we can. So you'd be moving deferral of the entire motion.
I don't know. There's always a way to do things when people want to, right?
Ms.
But
Bauer,
if
if
it's not possible, then
are you saying you didn't, well, again, I think it's procedure. It's not about wanting or not wanting, Ms. Bauer.
As council has chosen to not divide the motion, you would need to defer the whole motion.
So if you're moving a deferral of the entire motion, that would be what's required.
sure. I mean, could we potentially just defer it till the next meeting so that we could hear back from RCMP?
Are you moving deferral to December 2nd?
Sure.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Martins, so go ahead.
So yeah, if we would be able to hear back from the RCMP on the impact of this, and just if it's not a big deal, and they can appreciate the position that we find ourselves in, that would be helpful. That I'd feel more comfortable doing that. We have advocates here for fire and for bylaws, but I don't see anyone here from the RCMP, so that would be my deferral motion.
Okay, Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through yourself to staff or who could ever answer the question. With a deferral, would this impact the inclusion of these items in the financial planning process, and would that delay it and cause any issues there?
Mr. Cooner?
Your Worship, to Councillor Pratt, that may potentially impact some of the budget bylaws that may be brought forward. But if council chooses to defer the item, then finance can try to incorporate or delay that aspect.
Thank you.
Yeah, seeing no discussion, I'll call the question on the deferral of 05. And deferral was defeated with Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rent, Mayor Woodward, Councillor Van Popta, Councillor Ferguson opposed. Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. I want to respond to some of the comments made at this table. I heard facts versus feelings. Well, I just quoted to you guys from the RCMP's report. That was facts. And as the 2022 population numbers, it's 850 people in our township for every one police officer. That is a fact. And that is a very high number. And when we're looking at waiting for deintegration, what we are not including in that narrative is the fact that our population is continuing to grow in leaps and bounds. And frankly, by the time we are deintegrated, we'll probably need pretty much as many members as are currently at the detachment to police our municipality alone. So another fact I would give you, and it's a fact, for every school liaison officer, they service 16 schools each. And I'm hearing from the detachment that in order to put each patrol unit out to patrol our community requires them to call in overtime members, 2 to 3, every single shift. That is where they're at currently. And I hear from this table that this is being suggested because of decisions made in Ottawa. That is not the fault of the Langley RCMP, and it's not a fault of the frontline officers trying to do their job as well as they can, that those decisions are made. Yes, they are contract policing, but that what happens in Ottawa and the decisions made by Ottawa and the implications to us are not because of the Langley RCMP, and that's who we're forgetting about in those comments. And it is pitting because this is putting me in a position that I either throw the Langley RCMP under the bus and do not support them when they're already at critical in order to support fire and bylaw, which I do. So it's forcing my hand on this, and I'm not comfortable with it, and there's been no consultation done with the RCMP on the impact of this decision to their resourcing, and they're desperate for the bodies that we had previously agreed to. And for that, I will not be supporting this motion because all 3 services need proper servicing. Their fire and bylaw cannot arrest anybody under the criminal code. They cannot write tickets under the Motor Vehicle Act and regulations, and they cannot even apprehend a person under the Section 28 of the Mental Health Act. Only police can do that, and we're stretching them thinner and thinner.
Councillor Ferguson?
Well, thank you. I know that there's a lot of discussion about that, and then we all have our own interest in education, and I've said it many, many times that I'm a teacher, and you know, I make decisions and discussions around education, and other members have police backgrounds and other backgrounds. So, you know, we carry an education regarding that, and I think that it would be a challenge for an expectation for a firefighter, you know, with their job, and I'm not one, to be able to take on some police or even other challenges from a court-enforced basis. That would be a real challenge. So that's, I'm glad that they have their own job to do. They've got enough things to do, including saving people's lives and our loved ones that need help at a very short period of time. There is no question that safety is important, and police, fire, and bylaws, it's huge. And the examples given, Delta has their own police force, Abbotsford has their own police force, and now Surrey will be moving into their own police force, and that has been a challenge just in itself. And of course, Port Moody and a few others have their own police. We have the RCMP, and we have a good working relationship with the RCMP. And I remember the last superintendent, of course, Superintendent Adrian Marston, who appeared before us and gave us statistics. We asked questions and moved ahead, and that was the information. And I'm sure that is basically going to continue. The question kept on being asked, well, what part is in the city and what part is in the township? That's always been a challenge, getting that. At one time, we actually asked for an audit of how police services between the township and the city, and we got about halfway through, and they weren't able to proceed with it, staff retiring and other things. It just wasn't able to get it done. We are responsible for the people's purse, the budget, and there's only so much money we can administer. And the costs of, since policing seems to be up on the schedule, debate, is the cost of policing keeps going up. That's not the individual officer's fault. The cost of policing is going up, and but you know, our budget is very, very difficult. We can't keep raising double-digit taxes, probably, which really would be required to proceed with many of the initiatives we want to go through. I used to say to the superintendents when they came, I don't say it so much anymore, that if we raised all the necessary things for safety, we wouldn't have any money for Park and Rec. We'd have very little for Park and Rec, or libraries, or anything else. You could ask the people in engineering how many roads need repairing, and we have, what, 500 plus kilometers of roads. It's a real challenge and absolutely a dilemma. So this has been a good discussion. I still believe it's subject to the de-integration. So we'll see what happens, and change can happen at any time. I don't know what the numbers will be once de-integration does come in place. We'll have to ask those other communities that have done that, Pitt Meadows or others that have done that. So I think that there's been a lot of debate and discussion on this, and fortunately, I will be supporting it, but I know safety is huge for our community, and I appreciate the comments by all members of council.
Councillor Bailey?
So there's a few things that have been said that I fundamentally disagree with. One, decisions in Ottawa are made there, and it is those decisions that are generating this kind of sharing of the pain. Okay, when it comes to finance, we can't keep bringing up huge increases, and the increases that come out of Ottawa with no consultation whatsoever. They just give us the edict, and we have to pay the bill. And this is not a poke at the local officers. This is dealing with financial realities that are coming that are not in our control. I also fundamentally disagree with this is pitting fire against police. This is fire and police both sharing, being walked backward in a financial sense. The firefighters were going to be hired 11 and 11, and they're now going 8, 8, and 6. So if it's being viewed as only the RCMP are being cut back and not cut back, that are being not moved ahead, and the fire are getting a benefit, that's fundamentally wrong. Okay, both of these public service institutions are incredibly important and are the reason why two of us ran for council. And that's why both of these institutes are going to share in the financially responsible thing. We can't keep absorbing uncontrolled costs coming to us. We have controlled the costs of the firefighters. We know exactly how much we're going to pay them in the year 2026, but we have no idea what we're going to be paying RCMP officers in the year 2026. None. Even 2025, we don't know what's going to come out of Ottawa. So this is not a fire or police. This is both of these institutions sharing in financial responsibility, and that is where I've taken this. And, you know, I can't stress enough, with the de-integration, we will have a very real picture, not some data that's being generated conveniently from whoever. But we'll know exactly how many police officers are going to be servicing the people who pay for them, the township residents. And I just can't sit by and just keep saying, well, let's jack up another 6 point. The last increases due only to the RCMP are 1.64, 2.8, and 2.4% by themselves. Okay, I would love to hire more, and I'd love to hire more firefighters, but that's not the reality of our financial situation right now.
Yeah, I appreciate all the commentary. I appreciate seeing other speakers. I think there's definitely some alternative facts being thrown around out there. I think it's important to get back to some of the core numbers. In 2019, my first year on council, we added 10 new members in a single year after not adding any for quite some time. 4 more in 2021, 5 more in 2023, and 2 more in 2025 for 21 over 5. Addition, 40% of every additional budget from this community is going to the RCMP in this council's first 3 budgets. That seems to be where it's headed. So I sort of wholeheartedly reject it. It's no more than we pit, one sidewalk repair versus another. That's not how it is. Responsible financial decisions based upon new information, based upon significant investments in public safety in all 3 departments. And I think we're close to almost 70% of the first 3 budgets going straight to public safety. And so I don't think, I understand there's some that are going to want to make hay. Significant, it just isn't factual. For all aspects of the township, facing costs, maintenance budgets, collective agreements, non-discretionary increases in external contracts, while so many of our residents, and I think there isn't an ability to do it all. While some members of council may want that, but I think some of us and myself, I don't have the luxury of being a single issue councillor. We have to govern for all of the township and for all of the departments and for all of the needs while looking out for what is going to be a tough year for households in the township of Langley based upon utilities increases alone, imposed upon us by Metro Vancouver. Increases from the RCMP, as noted by Councillor Bailey, imposed upon us from Ottawa. And no reflection on whether they're deserved or not, but it was unforeseen back in 2022. And so I think it's very prudent to look at how to financially plan and spread some of these hires out, as Councillor Bailey is proposing, to be revisited in every budget bylaw that comes forward. This is looking to amend the financial plan proposal to come to council with these adjustments. They could be adjusted further. They could be changed again in 2026 to put them back in a more rapid schedule if some of the projections don't turn out to be as bad as they may. There is a process by which we have to follow to respond to all of the pressures that are coming. And I think to suggest that we're not keeping up with public safety hiring with the RCMP due to growth just isn't factual. We've been adding, up in the last 5 years, we've added 4.2 members per year. That, with 2025, if no new members are added, ultimately with this motion, that would drop to 3.5 per year, 3.4 per year. That is what we need to be targeting. There's nothing to stop council from looking at 2026, 2025, even 2027, and doing a big catch-up with 5, as we did in our first budget in 2023. And I think some of the commentary here is pretty offside, pretty negative. Talk about pitting people against each other. How about pitting our households versus each other? How about pitting one department against each other? I just think it's deeply irresponsible to frame it that way. And I think it's deeply irresponsible to apologize to members of the audience as well. I think what we're doing is we're investing in public safety like hasn't been seen before, and we're cost cutting, we're finding efficiencies, we're going line by line over some aspects of the budget. Some of us are anyway, to find the savings to pay for these significant increases in public safety. So we are still one of the municipalities in Metro Vancouver increasing taxes at some of the lowest rates while finding the money to make these investments. Unforeseen cost increases for the RCMP contract, a well-deserved collective agreement for our own firefighters, and bylaw enforcement changes have necessitated to have a second look at some of these timelines and look at them in the context of the 2025 and 2026 budgets and see what can be changed thereafter. I'm going to point out that in 5.1, subject to deintegration of the RCMP detachment reaching a stage of substantial completion. If that occurs quicker than the end of 2025, these can be put back in 2026. The challenge being that while we have an integrated detachment, resources that are being added are going to the city, with the city not paying its fair share, with the Township of Langley taxpayers paying for policing of another community, Township of Langley adding RCMP members to its budget that are policing another community. We need to get deintegration finished to start to move onto a path to provide better service and ensure that RCMP members that we do fund are policing the Township of Langley. I don't need bylaw or law enforcement lessons. What I need is suggestions and alternatives. If you want to put these back, then find something else you want to cut. Find something else to make up the difference so we're not just endlessly looking to tax increases to pay for these things. Do the work, because some of us are. And just making speeches about how we're pitting one person against another, again, I think is deeply irresponsible. With that, I'm going to call the question on 05. That carries with Councillor Martins opposed. Is there any other business? Right. Does anybody have any items for special closed? I have 2, Ms. Bauer, 2 personnel items. Does anybody else have anything for special closed? No. With that, get a motion to resolve into special closed, moved by Councillor Rent, seconded by Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rent. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. We'll just take a 10-minute recess and we'll convene special close at 4:30. Thank you.